What if the person your company had been treating as invisible was the only one keeping it alive? Mommy, Uncle Nathan in the basement taught me. He draws it on napkins. Dead silence. 200 engineers in that room. 43 years of combined doctoral degrees. A $40 million government contract riding on the next 30 minutes. And an 8-year-old girl had just solved the problem that had defeated every single one of them. She was standing on a chair to reach the whiteboard, chalk dust on her nose, shoes still damp from the rain, one pigtail slightly higher than the other, eyes shining the way a child's eyes shine when they know with complete certainty that they have done something wonderful. Her name was Amelia Thorne. She was never supposed to be here. Isabella Thorne gripped the edge of the conference table until her knuckles went white. Not from anger, not yet. From something she couldn't immediately name. Something that felt uncomfortably like the moment you realize you've been looking for your keys for 20 minutes and they were in your hand the whole time. Nathan. Who? She had built a $2.8 billion analytics firm on ruthless precision and 18-hour days. Done it alone. Left at 26 by a man who called fatherhood bad for his image. She had driven home from the hospital that night with a newborn in the back seat and the radio off. A single iron promise forming behind her sternum. Amelia will never lack a single thing. Not safety, not opportunity, not a mother who showed up. Elite tutors, the best piano teacher in the city, conveniently located in this building's basement so Isabella could work late without guilt. Scheduled, organized, efficient. Isabella was excellent at plans. She was considerably less excellent at the things that don't fit inside one. Lately, Amelia had grown quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of a child content in her own world, the hollow kind, friendless, lost in numbers the way some lonely children get lost in the bottom of a cereal bowl. Isabella had noticed, filed it between call pediatrician, re-sleep schedule, and reschedule Amelia's haircut again. Told herself it was a phase. She had been wrong. For 5 months she did not know about, Amelia had been slipping away after piano lessons. 10 minutes, down one floor, to the basement maintenance room, to a man in a faded gray uniform who most employees, if asked, could not have named. Nathan Reed. Isabella whispered it to herself, standing in front of 200 people, the boardroom windows gray with morning rain, a name she had never once heard spoken in this building. Not at all-hands meetings, not in performance reviews, not once. And yet her daughter had been saying it at the dinner table for months. And Isabella, somewhere between the quarterly forecasts and the contract negotiations, had simply not registered it. That realization landed quietly, the way the worst ones always do. What she would find at 3 o'clock in the morning, buried inside a sealed HR file that should never have been locked in the first place. It would not just shake her company, it would crack something open in her that she hadn't realized had been sealed shut for years. She stood there another moment, the chalk still on the whiteboard, the room still holding its breath, Amelia still smiling at her from that chair, and thought about something her own mother used to say while rolling out pie crust on a Sunday afternoon. Isabella, the most important conversations are the ones you keep putting off until after dinner. Isabella had always assumed her mother meant difficult conversations, arguments, hard news. She understood now that her mother had meant the small ones, the daily ones, the ones that happen at the kitchen table between the homework and the dishes, if you're actually there for them. She hadn't been there for enough of them. Stay with us, because what Isabella discovered in that file at 3 a.m. was not just a 5-year-old lie. It was the moment her entire understanding of success began to change. 5 years earlier, Nathan Reed had worn a very different uniform. A suit. A badge that read Lead AI Systems Engineer. A keycard that opened every server room on the 14th floor, where the machines hummed at a frequency that sounded, he always thought, a little like breathing. Steady, purposeful, alive. He was good at what he did. Not loudly good. The kind that solves things. The kind his colleagues slid their hardest problems toward at the end of a long Friday, with nothing more than a look that said, "You're the one who gets it." He was also a father. Single. His son Grayson was 5 years old, small for his age, dark eyes, a laugh that came out slightly too big for his body. Grayson was the axis everything else rotated around. Every decision Nathan made, every late shift accepted, every indignity quietly absorbed. Not as a burden, as a compass. Grayson had been born with a congenital heart condition, repaired before his first birthday, but never entirely behind him. The insurance that covered his care was the single most important line item in Nathan's life. He knew this the way farmers know the weather, not as information, as a condition of existence. Which is why, on a Tuesday night at 2 in the morning, when Nathan spotted the cooling failure on the server diagnostic, he didn't hesitate. The kind of cascading failure that, left unchecked for another 40 minutes, would have taken infrastructure down. Nathan triggered the emergency shutdown. He saved the company. 3 days later, Damian Blackwood had him fired. Unauthorized interference with critical systems. There was a legal agreement, watertight. Nathan's name was removed from the incident log, replaced with a narrative about a routine malfunction that Damian had heroically managed. Damian received a substantial bonus for operational excellence. Nathan received a cardboard box for his desk. He signed the agreement because Grayson needed the insurance. There was no other calculation to make. He accepted the only position available, overnight janitor. Same tower, same elevators. He learned quickly that invisibility is a specific physical feeling, not like disappearing, like standing in a lit room while everyone looks slightly to the left of where you're standing. A junior engineer he had personally mentored once held the elevator door, glanced at his uniform, let it close. Nathan rode the next one. He gave himself 30 seconds to feel it, then put it away. He kept the pen clipped inside his breast pocket, old habit. The kind that outlasts the job title by years. Then came the rainy Tuesday that changed everything. Amelia Thorne was waiting in the basement corridor for her mother. Isabella was running late from a board call, the way Isabella was always running late from board calls. The piano teacher had packed up and gone. The corridor smelled like wet umbrellas and floor wax. Nathan was struggling with a supply cart. A shelf had buckled under a box of broken fluorescent tubes. Glass scattered across the linoleum. Amelia watched for exactly 4 seconds. Then she knelt down on the floor in her good navy coat, the one with the brass buttons, and began sorting the debris by size. "Patterns are easier," she said quietly, "when things are organized first." Nathan went completely still. He looked at this child, serious face, careful hands, not performing helpfulness, but simply doing it the way you breathe. For the first time and longer than he could honestly remember, he smiled. A real one. He pulled a paper napkin from his pocket, sketched a simple logic puzzle. 3 shapes, 1 missing piece. A question mark. Amelia studied it for 7 seconds. Then she filled in the answer. "Again," she said. He drew another puzzle, then another. After piano class, 10 minutes, sometimes 12. Amelia would find Nathan in the basement. He taught her advanced mathematics the way a good neighbor teaches a grandchild to bake. Not from a curriculum, not toward a grade, because the child is hungry for it and the knowledge is right there, warm and ready. He also told her stories about hospital waiting rooms and picture books read aloud to a boy with monitors on his chest, about a mailroom clerk who cried, not from gratitude, from the simple surprise of being helped at all. "Did that make you sad?" Amelia asked. "It made me pay more attention," Nathan said. "The most powerful idea I know," he told her one afternoon, "is treating people with respect. It always gives you back more than you put in." Amelia pressed her lips together, the way children do when they are trying to memorize something their instincts already know is true. She started laughing again at dinner, talking about Uncle Nathan's napkins, leaving the table without being reminded. Isabella assumed it was the piano lessons working, until the boardroom morning. That night, unable to sleep, Isabella pulled the basement security footage. She watched Nathan teach her daughter. She watched them laugh over a napkin puzzle. She saw the photograph of a small boy propped against the cleaning cart. Dark eyes, a hospital bracelet still visible on his wrist. Her chest tightened. Something moved through her she couldn't file neatly away. Then she picked up her phone. Pull Nathan Reed's complete sealed file. Override everything. I want it now. The HR director paused just a beat too long before answering. That pause. That was the thing that kept Isabella awake until 3 in the morning. And what she found when the file finally arrived was worse than anything she'd imagined. Because the file didn't just reveal what Damien had done to Nathan, it revealed what Isabella's own company, her name on the door, her signature on every policy, had been built on top of. The basement storage room at 3:30 in the morning is not a glamorous place. Bare bulb, shelves of cleaning supplies, the particular smell of mop water and industrial lemon soap. Isabella stood in the center of it in her coat, heels on concrete, holding a printed file thick enough to have its own weight. Nathan looked up from the utility sink without surprise, as though he'd been expecting her, as though the only remarkable thing was that it had taken this long. "You've been teaching my daughter," Isabella said, "behind my back." Nathan turned off the faucet, dried his hands, set the cloth down. "I've been answering her questions." He looked at her steadily. "There's a difference. You had no right." He didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. "When was the last time you asked her what truly lights her up inside?" The room was very quiet. Isabella had an answer ready. She always had an answer ready, but it didn't come. The honest answer was that she didn't know. Not precisely. She knew Amelia's test scores, her shoe size, the name of the stuffed rabbit she'd slept with since age 2. She knew the practical geography of her daughter's life with the thoroughness of someone who had organized it entirely. But what lit her up? When had Isabella last simply asked? She looked down at the file. Her hands were not quite steady. She pressed them flat against the cover. The original server logs were all there, time-stamped, unaltered. Nathan's emergency shutdown had been the only correct response. His action had prevented a total infrastructure collapse, saved an estimated $250 million. Damien's incident report had reclassified the event as a minor equipment irregularity, self-corrected. He had removed Nathan's name, inserted his own as the on-call supervisor who had monitored the situation. He had collected a bonus of $112,000 for crisis prevention, a crisis he had erased from the record so completely that Isabella, reading it all for the first time, felt a cold and very specific anger settle into her chest, like a stone dropped in still water. She had been running a company built on a foundation she had never once questioned. That was the part she couldn't set aside. She thought about how many decisions she had made with total confidence over the past 5 years. Hiring decisions, strategy decisions, the quiet, accepted cruelties of a culture that celebrated outcomes without asking too many questions about the methods. She had told herself it was pragmatism. She was no longer entirely sure that was true. She turned to the employee photo at the front of the file. Nathan Reed, age 31. Suit, easy posture, a quiet smile. Eyes direct and unhurried. The look of someone with nothing to prove. She studied that photograph longer than she intended. "Stop it, Isabella." She closed the folder. Word reached the board by 8 the next morning. By 9, 3 senior members had called. The smooth, careful language of people who mean something considerably more direct. The janitor situation needed to be resolved. The legal exposure. The optics. Isabella drafted a termination notice for Nathan. She was 3 lines in when she stopped. Her hands had gone completely still above the keyboard. She sat listening to the building's HVAC system hum. Thinking about the photograph, the quiet, direct eyes, the way Grayson's photo had been propped openly against the cleaning cart, not hidden, just there. The way you keep close what matters most without apology. Then Amelia appeared in the doorway. 11 o'clock at night, yellow star pajamas, hair still in its daytime braids, slightly fraying at the ends. Her face had the expression of a child who has been lying awake in the dark, rehearsing. "Mommy," her voice was very small, "please don't take Uncle Nathan away." Isabella looked up. "He's the only one." Amelia's voice cracked on only the way a carefully controlled child's voice breaks when they have held something too long. "He's the only one who actually sees me." The room was very quiet. Isabella did not cry. She hadn't cried in years. But something behind her eyes went sharp and hot. She closed the laptop. She did not fire him. What she did instead was issue a formal operations policy. Janitorial staff restricted to overnight maintenance hours. No unauthorized contact with executive family members. Camera monitoring of all non-public common areas. Nathan signed the acknowledgement form without a word. Amelia stopped laughing at dinner. 3 weeks passed, then a fourth. The platform's predictive models began to drift. Small errors, the kind that look like routine variants if no one is watching closely enough. No one escalated. Damien said it was nothing. Routine variants, patched by Thursday. He said it with the easy, particular confidence of a man who already knows exactly where the problem is. Because he had placed it there, quietly, deliberately. 3 lines of corrupted code buried 4 layers deep in the production model. Inserted the same week Nathan had been placed back under surveillance. Isabella had not yet understood what Nathan had known since the night he signed that agreement and took the mop job to keep his son alive. The most dangerous thing in any system isn't the error you can measure. It's the one someone hid on purpose. And it was already spreading. The pattern map landed on Isabella's desk on a Wednesday afternoon. Her lead data engineer, Dr. Priya Ose, 7 years at Nexus. Careful, precise. The kind of person who double-checks the thing other people consider already checked. She set it down without a word, just placed it in front of Isabella and waited. 6 weeks of model drift, graphed and color-coded. The errors weren't scattered the way genuine variance scatters. They had a shape, a repeating signature, subtle enough to read as noise if you glanced at it, deliberate enough to be unmistakable if you actually looked. Inserted with CTO-level system access. Dated to the same week Nathan had been placed on restricted hours. Isabella studied the page for a long moment. Then she looked up. "When did you find this?" "This morning," Priya said. "I wanted to be certain before I came to you." Isabella nodded once. Priya left. Isabella sat very still in her chair, which was not something she typically did. She looked out at the city below. All that glass and steel. All those lit rectangles of people working late. She thought about the photograph in the sealed file, the quiet eyes, the suit worn without vanity. She thought about Amelia, who had not told a single joke at dinner in 3 weeks, who now carried the original napkin folded in her coat pocket, its edges soft from handling. Isabella had found it in the wash and set it on Amelia's dresser without comment, as though it were an ordinary object, and not a small square of paper that had apparently done more for her daughter than 4 years of elite tutoring. She picked up her keys. Nathan's apartment was a 3rd-floor walk-up in a neighborhood where the parking was tight, and the streetlights had that amber quality. The kind that makes everything look like an old photograph, a little soft at the edges, colors slightly warm. The building was ordinary and solid, the kind of place where people were getting through the day in one piece, and not particularly asking for recognition for it. She knocked without calling ahead. Nathan opened the door in a faded Henley and stocking feet, one sock with a small hole near the left toe. The kind of detail you only notice when you're standing in someone's actual home, rather than their professional presentation of themselves. The apartment behind him was small and clean, the organized clean of limited space managed with care, where every object has been assigned a place because there isn't room for anything that hasn't earned one. A packed bookshelf along the living room wall. A kitchen table with 2 chairs. A whiteboard above the kitchen counter covered in equations in 2 different handwritings, blue marker and green. A large, careful hand and a small looping one, woven together like a long conversation. Grayson was at the kitchen table with a glass of orange juice and a book about space. He looked up at Isabella with his father's dark, curious eyes and offered a small, polite smile. Then his expression shifted. He set one hand flat and careful against his chest. The practiced gesture of a child who has learned over a short lifetime that his body occasionally requires management. His face went pale. He exhaled slowly, too slowly, working at it. Nathan crossed the room before Isabella had fully processed what she was seeing. He sat on the arm of Grayson's chair, wrapped one arm around his son's shoulders, pressed his forehead briefly, gently to the top of the boy's head. "Breathe, buddy," he said, low and even. "Right here. Just breathe with me." Grayson closed his eyes. Isabella stood very still in the doorway. She had managed crises worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She had held boardrooms together through 3 major data breaches, a hostile acquisition attempt, one particularly grim January when 3 senior engineers quit in the same week. She knew how to be steady in a room that needed steadiness. But watching this, a father's forehead resting on his son's hair, a hand reaching without looking for a napkin and a pen, the whole wordless choreography of 2 people who had learned to carry something heavy together. She felt, unexpectedly and completely, like she was the one who didn't know what she was doing. Nathan's free hand reached sideways and took a napkin from the counter. He set it in front of Grayson, drew 3 quick shapes with a pen. A simple puzzle, just enough to give an anxious mind something to hold on to. Grayson opened his eyes, looked at the napkin. His breathing steadied. Nathan looked up at Isabella. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's television played something with a laugh track. "I was wrong." Isabella's voice came out lower than she intended, rougher, like something that had been sitting in a closed room. "About all of it. The company is failing. The models are corrupted. My daughter hasn't smiled in 3 weeks." She stopped, swallowed. "And the way you are with people, what you've been doing, how you think, it's been teaching me more than anything in any boardroom ever has." Nathan was quiet. He looked at his son, who was now working the napkin puzzle with the focused calm of a child who has learned to be very good at focusing. Then he looked at her. "I'll help," he said, "but I have conditions." She waited. She had become, in recent weeks, considerably better at waiting. No more making the people at the bottom pay for the decisions made at the top. Simple. No drama. That's the first. The second, whatever I did 5 years ago to save that server farm gets put back on the record. Permanently. Not for my sake. A glance at Grayson. For his. Someday. And the third, his voice went quieter. Amelia learns because it brings her joy. Not for press. Not for the board. Isabella, đóng vai trò người mẹ thực sự quan tâm. I didn't know she was unhappy. I genuinely didn't know. Nathan was quiet for a moment, not in judgment. She could tell the difference now between a silence that was withholding and one that was simply making room. She wasn't unhappy, he said at last. She was lonely. Those aren't always the same thing. Lonely means there's someone missing. He glanced toward the living room, where Grayson had fallen asleep on the couch with his spacebook open on his chest. She just needed someone to sit still with her long enough to find out what she already knew. Isabella looked at the whiteboard, at the 2 handwritings, large and small, looping around each other, blue and green. She thought about every dinner she'd eaten standing at the kitchen counter with her phone in her hand, while Amelia sat at the table alone, talking about napkins and puzzles, and how Isabella had nodded without really hearing a word. "I'm going to be better at that," she said. It wasn't a declaration, it was quiet. More like a note to herself, said aloud by accident. Nathan looked at her. "You already are," he said. "You're here." They worked at the kitchen table for 2 hours, the whiteboard filling with equations in blue and green. 2 handwritings again, large and small, side by side. At one point, they reached for the same pen simultaneously, and both pulled back. Isabella felt warmth rise in her face and turned deliberately toward the whiteboard. "Stop it, Isabella." She had been telling herself that for weeks now. She was becoming less convincing. Later, driving home past the amber streetlights, she said it quietly to no one, to the empty passenger seat and the dark. "Kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing I've ever seen in action." She said it twice. The second time, it felt less like a discovery and more like something she had always known and simply hadn't been still enough to hear. But Damian Blackwood had not been still. While Isabella sat at that kitchen table, he had been in his corner office using his administrator credentials to build a trap. The kind he had kept assembled and ready, like a man who has always known, somewhere underneath all the confidence, that the truth was still out there, waiting. The kind of trap you only set when you've run out of everything else, and fear is the last tool you have left. What Damien had prepared would force Isabella to stand in front of 200 people, officials, press, the entire company, and choose in public between protecting herself and telling the truth. Thursday morning, 7:45 a.m. Isabella's phone lit up with 2 messages in rapid succession. The first was from IT Security. CTO admin credentials used at 6:14 a.m. Biometric access for Nathan Reed, all floors blocked. The second arrived from an unknown external address, forwarded through a chain of servers. Live stream scheduled for 8:30 a.m. The engineer who almost destroyed Nexus Analytics, the true story. Isabella read both messages standing at her kitchen counter in her coat, coffee going cold beside her hand. She was 43 minutes from the government contract review presentation. The one Nexus had been building toward for 8 months. The one that would either secure the company's future or unravel it in front of the people who mattered most. She set the phone face down, picked it up again. She thought about the sealed HR file. What had been buried in it for 5 years? She thought about the log timestamps and exactly whose name belonged on that incident report. She thought about Grayson's careful hand pressed flat against his chest. She thought about Amelia's voice cracking on the word only. She thought about her mother's cast iron skillet, seasoned black from 40 years of Sunday cornbread. What her mother had said about the things most worth keeping being the ones that still work after everything else has changed. Isabella Thorne sent a building-wide emergency broadcast. All hands. Ford room, 8 a.m. Mandatory. The room filled in 11 minutes. Senior engineers, department heads, the 3 government contract officials who had been waiting in the lobby with their lanyards and leather portfolio folders. Press had been tipped. 3 reporters in the back row with phones held at careful angles. Damien stood along the right wall, tablet in hand, live stream loaded and ready. He looked composed. He had prepared for this. Isabella walked to the front of the room without her notes, without her prepared slides, without any of the careful professional architecture she typically brought into a high-stakes room. "Before we begin the contract review," she said. Her voice was steady in the way that comes not from calm but from decision. "I need to tell all of you something true." She told them everything. The cooling failure, the logs, Nathan's emergency shutdown, the single correct response, made alone at 2 in the morning by the one person with the presence of mind to act, saving an estimated $250 million that the company had gone right on spending without ever knowing it owed him. The falsified report, the sealed file, the bonus collected for preventing a crisis that had been quietly removed from history. She did not hedge. She did not use the smooth, managed language of crisis communications. The language that says we regret without ever quite saying we were wrong. She said it the way her mother used to say hard things at the kitchen table, directly, without theater, with the plain understanding that truth told simply is still truth. I should have asked harder questions years ago. I was more focused on outcomes than on what was actually true inside my own company. That stops today. She paused. The room was absolutely still. One of the government officials had set down his pen. The man who saved this company 5 years ago has been mopping its floors ever since. That is not something I can fix with a press release or a severance package. What I can do, what this company will do starting today, is tell the truth about what happened and build something different on top of it. Something that doesn't require burying the people who do the right thing. It was the longest she had ever spoken in that room, without a slide deck behind her. It was the most honest she had been in a boardroom in years, possibly ever. She felt lighter for it, frighteningly so, as if she'd been carrying something in her coat pockets for so long she'd forgotten it had weight, and had just now turned them out. Damien's thumb hovered over the live stream button. He looked around the room. 200 faces turned toward Isabella. The government officials with their folders open, pens still. The reporters in the back recording her, not him. He lowered the tablet. The security team was already moving along the wall. Nathan came in through the side door, a simple suit, not new, broken in at the shoulders the way a suit gets when it belongs to someone who wears it because it's appropriate, not because it impresses. Grayson on his left, Amelia on his right. Navy coat, brass buttons, the folded napkin in her pocket, chin lifted at an angle that was, Isabella noticed with a small internal jolt, entirely her own. Nathan sat at the main workstation, used Isabella's credentials, opened the corrupted model without comment. The room was quiet, in the specific way rooms go quiet when everyone understands that something real is happening. He worked the way he always worked, without performance, with the focused, unhurried confidence of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and why. The sabotage was buried 4 layers deep in a production subroutine, elegant in the way that well-designed deception tends to be. Nathan located it in just under 4 minutes. He built the correction anchored to the same predictive equation Amelia had written on this boardroom's whiteboard 2 weeks earlier. Her solution, his original architecture, joined together in a way that felt less like repair and more like something being returned to its rightful place. He ran the restore. Clean data across every screen in the room. One government official leaned forward, exchanged a quiet word with the second. Both nodded. The $40 million contract was confirmed before noon. Damien Blackwood was escorted from the building at 11:15. His credentials deactivated as the elevator doors closed. He didn't say anything. The building moved on around him the way buildings do. Impersonally, without ceremony, as if filling back in the space where something that didn't belong had finally been removed. Nathan stood by the window while the room returned to its ordinary noise. He looked out at the city. Amelia appeared at his elbow. "Did we fix it?" He looked down at her. "We fixed a lot of things," he said. "But the most important repair, the one with no line item on any budget, was just beginning. And it would happen not in a boardroom or a server room, but in a school gymnasium that smelled like floor polish and possibility. 6 weeks is not a very long time. In 6 weeks, you can plant tomatoes, but they won't be ripe yet. You can start a jigsaw puzzle on the kitchen table, get 2/3 of the way through, and discover 3 edge pieces are missing. One of them almost certainly under the refrigerator. You can grow fond of a particular route to the grocery store, past the yellow house with the hydrangeas, left at the church, park behind the hardware store where nobody ever seems to need anything after 3 on a Tuesday afternoon. In 6 weeks, Amelia's napkin lab opened on the 2nd floor of the Nexus building. 3 long tables, good light from tall windows, a whiteboard running the entire length of the east wall, colored markers in a jar at every seat, and at the center of each table, within easy reach of every child who sat down, a stack of plain white paper napkins. The ordinary kind, the sort you fold under a glass of sweet tea on a summer afternoon. Because Nathan had always believed that the best tools were the ones that didn't make anyone feel they needed to earn the right to pick them up. It was free, open to every employee's child, from the CEO's daughter to the children of the overnight maintenance crew. Executives and janitors sat in the same folding chairs and helped the same small people. After the first week, nobody found this remarkable at all. Nathan taught 3 evenings a week. He always started with a napkin, no laptops, no slides, just a pen, a flat white square of paper, and the reliable grace of a patient person asking, "What do you already know? Show me." Some evenings, Isabella sat in the back row. She never said anything. She had spent her entire career being the loudest intelligence in every room she entered. And she was finding, slowly and with some effort, that there was a different kind of knowing, the kind that looks like listening. One Tuesday evening in October, a 7-year-old boy named Marcus, son of one of the building's overnight security guards, solved a logic puzzle that stumped 3 of the senior engineer's kids sitting next to him. He didn't announce it. He just slid the napkin across the table to Nathan and looked at him with the quiet, wondering expression of a child who has discovered something about himself that he didn't know was there. Nathan smiled. He pulled a fresh napkin from the stack and drew a harder one. Isabella watched from the back row and said nothing, but she wrote something in the small spiral notebook she'd started keeping in her coat pocket. The blue one, the kind you buy at the drugstore checkout for $1.75. And she pressed the pen down a little harder than usual, the way you do when you want to make sure something stays. The Math in Motion regional finals were held on a Saturday in May, in a school gymnasium that smelled like floor polish and old bleachers. The particular smell that gymnasiums carry across every decade and every part of the country, as if it were written into the building code. Isabella sat in the third row with a foam cup of coffee from the lobby machine, the kind that always came out slightly too sweet. She didn't mind. She hadn't been minding small imperfections much lately. Amelia and Grayson had spent 4 weeks building their entry on Nathan's kitchen table, a kinetic sculpture assembled entirely from recycled server components. Circuit boards, cooling fans, salvaged wire, 3 small motors. When you pressed the activation panel, a piece of polished aluminum stamped with a small napkin drawing. The whole structure turned in a slow, interlocking pattern that demonstrated, if you looked carefully, the same predictive algorithm Amelia had written on the boardroom whiteboard 2 months before. They called it the kindness engine. First place. Amelia held the microphone with both hands, the way an 8-year-old holds a microphone designed for taller people. She looked out at the gymnasium without nerves. "The best teacher I ever had," she said, wore a gray uniform and drew puzzles on napkins. The room went still. "He taught me that the most powerful idea in the world is treating people with respect." She paused. She had clearly rehearsed this pause. "And he taught my mom to smile again. Every single day." She found her mother's face in the third row and smiled. Wide, unguarded. The smile of a child who has decided to be thoroughly, unashamedly happy. The gymnasium was quiet for one long breath. Then, here and there, people began to cry. The quiet, caught-off-guard kind that happens when something true gets said in a room and everyone recognizes it simultaneously. The way you recognize a song you haven't thought of in 30 years and still know every word. Isabella pressed 2 fingers to the corner of her eye. The coffee went cold in her hand. Afterward, in the corridor, while Amelia and Grayson argued cheerfully about whether the east motor or the west motor had been the more critical structural element, Isabella found Nathan by the exit, coat on, hands in his pockets, watching the kids with the easy, unhurried attention of someone who has learned that the most important things rarely announce themselves. "I was wrong," she said, lighter this time. The way a thing sounds when you finally set down what it was attached to. "Your kindness didn't just save the company. It fixed something in me I didn't know was broken." Nathan looked at her. "I think I'm falling in love with the man who reminded me what actually matters." He was quiet for a moment. Then let's build something real. One kind act, one napkin at a time. He was smiling. She kissed him, right there in the gymnasium corridor. And from somewhere near the parking lot came the sound of 2 children cheering at a volume entirely disproportionate to their size. 6 months later, Nexus launched the company-wide Napkin Kindness Program. Open records, mentorship across every level, a seat at every table regardless of what your badge said. Within a year, it was the most cited reason new employees gave for choosing Nexus over competitors who paid more. Nathan's new title appeared on his office door one Monday morning. Amelia had put it there herself, written in green marker on a folded paper napkin. Chief Kindness Architect. He found it slightly embarrassing, the way genuinely humble people find recognition embarrassing, not because they don't value it, but because they were never doing the work for the recognition. The nameplate drew attention to something he'd always considered simply the right way to be. He left it on the door, because some things, placed there with love, are not meant to be moved. This story reminds us that the people we pass without seeing, the ones who stay late and take the night shift and never put their own names in the report, are sometimes the very ones holding everything together. That our children, when we stop long enough to truly listen, will tell us exactly what they need. That kindness is not the soft choice. It is the most deliberate, most enduring, most quietly powerful thing a person can choose to practice every single day. And that sometimes, in the most ordinary corridor of the most ordinary building, everything you've been searching for, the connection, the purpose, the chance to start again, has been waiting there all along. All you have to do is stop and look.